Hi everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you Tracy for putting this together. Thank you panelists for agreeing to join us. Pretty informal program for today. I really want it to feel like a conversation. We have people representing all different aspects of office use and development here, and we have again their bios in your programs. So we're going to try to keep it short so we can get to the heart of the conversation. But if you would each introduce yourself, your name, a little bit about what you do, and then question for you, what is the biggest myth in commercial office real estate today? So Scott, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Lurie with F Street Group. It's great to be here. And the greatest myth is, that's a good question. I would say that, I would say the greatest myth for us right now, well, I guess in anything, is that demand does not exist in office in today's market. We are seeing demand. We see RFPs coming through every day or every week, and we're still very excited about the office market. So thanks for being here, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Scott. Mike?
Good answer. I'm Mike Watts. I oversee office leasing in the U.S. for CBRE. I would probably say I'm based in Chicago. I would probably say that old location thing, which I get why people think about it, but I think it's really timing. I think it's always been timing. I've just seen too many owners do everything right and fail, and too many owners do everything wrong and succeed. So right now is a really interesting time. That's the panel, and I think you get some good perspectives. But I would say it's all about timing.
Okay.
Brady.
Hello, I'm Brady Mick. I am Director of Workplace Strategy at EUA here in town, and I'm an architect, so forgive me if I talk design today, but I probably will. I think it is an absolute myth that we think the pandemic changed the nature of work. The nature of work had already changed. The pandemic shone a light on that change that had already occurred. And I'm going to add a second one. I think it's a myth that hybrid holds the answers. Maybe we can talk more about that.
Definitely want to talk more about that. Thank you, Brady. Kelly?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelli Gabel. I am with Good Karma Brands. We are a media company based out of Milwaukee. I would say the biggest myth is probably that a office lease is just a transaction. We're actually building out a new space here, and the ownership has been great. We both just laid our cards on the table and figured out what the deal and the transaction would be. So it really is for us a true partnership and not just a transaction.
Those were really good answers. Thanks, everybody. I want to start with Mike, kind of start at a big level nationally. What are things looking like in the office market today? Where are we seeing vacancy rates, lease rates, occupancy? Probably enough to start with.
Yeah, just a small topic. I think when I travel around, I travel virtually every week all over the country talking to brokers and owners, consulting, trying to figure out strategies. So I'll tell you what's number one top of mind with institutional owners and private owners, and it's this. In the U.S. right now, in the top 20 largest cities for office space, there's 450 million square feet of Class A office space that's 15 to 30 years old, right? That is the office space that has been the most affected by COVID in the last 2.5 years. If you add other markets like Milwaukee to that, it's about another 450 million. So you've got almost 1 billion square feet of Class A office in cities. It's pretty well located and pretty nice. And these two guys will be able to tell you as well as you're on your office search what tenants are looking for right now. A lot of those buildings currently don't provide, right? And it's more experience-based. So you see always in the paper or the Wall Street Journal, they talk about flight to quality. That's a really narrow view of life in real estate. It's really flight to experience. It's not age-based, right? There's plenty of 5-star hotels in 100-year-old buildings, and the building's part of the experience, right? It works out. The post office in Chicago, if you have not seen that redevelopment, that's probably the most successful redevelopment of an office into a creative office in the country. 2.5 million feet, 98% leased, and if they had another 500,000 feet, they could lease it in 60 days today, right, in a very slow market. So what do you do to those buildings? Well, the owners I talk to own a lot of that real estate. You have a lot of that real estate in this city, right? And it's really trying to get over that hump of sort of being upset about, man, I just lost my anchor tenant to new construction, versus what do I need to do to make my building more fun? What do I need to do to help my tenant C-suite get their people back to the office? This is one of the rare times owners and tenants are really aligned, because historically the tenant's like, you're charging me too much rent. The landlord's like, pay me more rent, right? Now both of them are like, what can we do to help the building help me get my employees back to the office? And that's kind of the stuff that these two, when they're working on projects, are helping these owners figure out. So that's the number one thing I would say right now.
So kind of going with that theme of integrating, bringing employees back to the office, and how can landlords help you do that? Kelli, can you tell us a little bit about what goes into your decision making for when you're looking for office space in different markets, what's important to you, and why you would select one building over another?
So for us, an office is definitely part of our recruitment and retention as a company. And so it's, very important. It's obviously part of collaboration for us, which is important as well. But I would say we're pretty greedy. We want everything, just like everyone else. But we want a great partnership with the landlord or the owner. The typical amenities, gyms, common spaces that are renovated and new, that offer, coffee bars, social gatherings, dog friendly. Parking is something we always offer. All of our office spaces are in downtown cities, and we always offer parking as a benefit. So those are some of the things that we would be looking for.
And I believe you're in the office full time, right? Your staff, or you're bringing them back?
Correct. It depends on the market. New York and LA, there are teammates who have, over a 2-hour commute each way, so that's more of a hybrid situation, but we definitely believe we're best when we're all together. So for the most part, we'll be back in an office full time.
We can clap for that. I think we're all excited about that. I was kidding, but thank you. So Scott, you've been involved in some big projects in downtown, and one that was near and dear to my heart is the 42, and you totally planned for that based on what the end user's experience would be. How did you come to that conclusion? Because I think you were first to market with a lot of the things that you did there.
Yeah, the idea of wanting everything or using your office space as a recruiting tool was something that we saw several years ago. And when we started the 42, which was a empty shell at that point, the idea was really selfishly was, what do I want to see in our office? And we wanted to have great common area space. We wanted to have great amenities. In addition to office and industrial, we do multifamily, and multifamily was, the catalyst, I think, for amenities in living, and that has transcended into office. And so, with the partnership with Rinka, we asked them to go and visit some of the Silicon Valley forward-thinking office spaces of Adobe and Google and see some of the amenities they have. And so we invested a lot in there. Our cap, so to speak, on the BOMA, we capped ourselves and put a little bit more money into what landlord was going to contribute to building, which I think is a novel thought still to this day, and I think that needs to change. Is to put amenities into these buildings are not cheap, but they're really good. We've got a great relationship. Badger Mutual, who's our tenant, is doing incredibly well and really loves the space, and they're seeing recruitment and growth in their business. I think a lot they attribute it to the space. If we had another 100,000 feet, I think, in the building, I think we would lease it. So, I think amenity-rich office is very important to our group, selfishly, and so we brought it to everyone else, and we've seen great results out of it.
I think that ties in really well with what Kelli and Mike were saying. Okay, Brady, this is a question that we talked about a little bit, but what are the barriers that are currently entrenched that stand in the way of a higher value work? So achieving a complex balance between focus, collaboration, and innovation.
The barriers are many. We are, I believe, we are dealing with unlearning many things about the nature of work in order to design the next generation of workplace that we're all searching for, which does what? Brings people back, gives them reason to be there, gives them great experiences. You use the word experience, but we have to shed some beliefs of the past. So one of the barriers is that we're designing for each and every individual. I don't think that's the future of workplace. I think the future of workplace is entirely based on teamwork, and I think it has been for 10, 15, maybe 20 years, maybe back to the 80s. So I think we have to unlearn the fact that we count the space by how many people are going to go in it. That's a very hard thing to unlearn. But we know a lot of stuff, so we know that innovation and collaboration are they were before, they were during, and they still are two key words in work and creating place for work. So I think if we can find ways to no longer bifurcate amenity space from workspace, they're not two different things anymore. You know, all the individuals work over there, and when they get tired, they go over there and do what? It's the old ping pong table argument, isn't it, guys? You know, is that allowed in the culture? Is it allowed for the business perk? No, we got to bring these things together entirely. I see that the Chicago Library. I mean, the entire space is an experience because they have successfully blended focus with collaboration, focus with community, community with innovation. These things all come together in an ecosystem instead of a hybrid either-or model. Did that make any sense at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike, do you want to speak a little bit more to, I know you had mentioned previously in our conversation, Fulton Market and how successful that part of Chicago has been. What have they done that's worked really well? Have they been able to integrate what Brady is talking about?
I think so. For those who don't know, Fulton Market is a downtown submarket, walking distance northwest of what you would consider, the CBD proper, the high-rises proper. It was the meatpacking district. So 20 years ago, there's people with white coats with blood on them, because that's what they were doing. And the first major tenant that decided to go into that market go kind of proximate to that market was Sara Lee, who was a downtown standard Fortune 500 company, moved to the suburbs. At that time, you saw a lot of companies moving to the suburbs, campus setting. Then the talent hit them. They could not recruit the kind of talent that they wanted because those young people were living, graduating from a Big Ten school, living downtown, and they were unwilling to commute to the suburbs. So they moved into that market. Subsequent to that, it just became a mix of boutique hotels. If you're a Top Chef, that's where you want to locate. The real estate was still relatively cheap, right? And once you got critical mass, and the event was when Google looked in downtown Chicago and they said, we're going to take 600,000 feet. We're going to take this cold storage building, thaw it out, punch windows, and add on to it. Once they did that, everything changed in that market. Then people started flocking to that market. A couple blocks away, McDonald's, who's been Chicago icon in the suburbs forever, they came down, WPP. So right now, 5 years ago, that market was 1.5% of the total stock in downtown Chicago. Now it is 5% of the total stock. 5 years ago, it was 1.5% of the stock, 2.5% of the activity. Now it is 5% of the stock, 26% of the activity in Chicago. If you have a building and it's being delivered and you executed well, you're not order taking, but you're pretty close right now. And those rents, when they first started, were probably 21 net with like $8 or $9 in tax and operating. Now they're 42 net, right? And it's a war to get to the best. But in there, you have lap pools, you have bowling alleys, you have all this stuff inside a building just for those tenants. It's not public space. So, but that was done for a reason. And the attraction to young talent in Chicago, people not having cars, that kind of thing, predating, as you said, I think COVID was accelerant. It was already happening, but it accelerated this conversation. So right now, that is known as the #1 hottest market in the U.S. So you should go down there and just see it, because there's things that are done to these buildings. When I was in Kansas City last week. I was in Houston this week. There's things in that market that we're going to export, but we're going to scale it. You're not going to do the same thing in Fulton Market that you would do in Milwaukee, but you can get the same kind of an effect for a different kind of a price point, because you're providing a different kind of a product. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and it's so close. If you're an office leasing broker, you should go down there, spend a night in that market. Even the hotels, they delivered a boutique hotel to Hoxton. Now, it sounds like what the Hoxton is going to do, because everybody likes its lobby so much, they're going to make that a membership, right? Because people are just going there to work, right, during the day. Instead of going into the office, they're going into this hotel. So, we'll give you a $50 a month charge. You have a barista, and you have a full bar at your disposal. Live it up. And so that's an example. And not every, but most major cities have that. Wynwood in, Miami, Deep Ellum in Dallas, North Loop in Minneapolis. There are these markets that all of a sudden have taken off. They're small, but that's kind of where the tech strip in Pittsburgh. If you're Apple and you're 30,000 feet, you're only going to the strip district in Pittsburgh. You're not going to go into downtown CBD high-rise space. So it's just an evolution, I think.
So it sounds like COVID may have accelerated some trends that were already existing, before. One thing that I think maybe people couldn't have foreseen or didn't expect that happened as a result of COVID was sublease space. And I think in Milwaukee, we probably haven't seen as much of it as in some larger markets. But Kelli, have you been pursuing sublease space for your tenancy anywhere? If you could speak to that a little bit. And then Mike, I'd love to hear a national thought on that too.
We have. We recently acquired an office in LA and New York. New York, we did not acquire an actual office with it. So we needed to find something very quickly and turnkey, meaning turnkey, internet, copier, everything. We ended up partnering with WeWork and their HQ model, which was perfect. It included furniture, like I said, copier, everything. But the broker we did work with was CBRE, actually. There was unlimited amounts of sublease space that was available, and pretty much turnkey, and continues to be the case in New York. So,
are we going to see that trend continuing, or is that space, are people going to end up moving back into it? What do you think will happen, Mike?
On sublease space, I would say in the grand scheme of what's going on in office space, it's probably overrated. Most markets carry a lot of sublease space, so you're looking at the incremental amount, right? And I would say where you see it hit the hardest is a city that is dominated by an industry. You're diversified here. You have law firms, you have consulting firms, you have technology firms. Detroit is tied to the auto industry, regardless of what anybody says. Houston is tied to energy, regardless of what anybody says. So if you go to Houston right now, just to give you perspective, I don't know how many full floors, just full floors, they can be occupied, they can be vacant, are in Milwaukee. There are 260 vacant full floors in Houston right now. So I'm just giving you perspective. Because COVID hurt, but Houston was tied to energy. Energy went off a cliff. You'd have big companies like Chevron lease 600,000 feet, they never moved in. So now, if you had that kind of an option, you have a credit sub-landlord. Their credit's better than the building owner's credit. They never use their tenant improvement allowance, but they got an allowance based on big-time credit, and you can go lease space at 50 to 75 cents on the dollar and do a long-term lease. In a market like that, a sublease space does hurt it a lot because it competes with the direct space. But I say overall, I don't think it's anywhere near the issue people think it is.
It's good to hear. Brady, what is the role of design in evaluating the value of commercial real estate and getting employees engaged and everything else?
Those are two distinctive questions, are they not?
So the value of design is
thinking about the future state. That's what we do in design. We often are put in a position of having to plan for day one, but really we need to think about year 5 or however long these lease terms are. I've seen them get shorter and shorter in my 30 years. I think you would agree with that, wouldn't you? Shorter and shorter? I haven't seen a 10-year lease with a customer in a long time. But we are thinking about out there, what is the value of space as a tool, as a resource, as an environment for human ability? That's what we do. So that requires imagination and conversation and investigation, and data still rules. I mean, business loves numbers, so let's go find some good data and put it into a form where we can take action on it today. And again, that comes out into certain barriers, if I may again, certain barriers that hit us in design. And I'll give you one right now. Workplace. What is it? It's cubicles, offices, and conference rooms. I mean, seriously, isn't it? And then now we've got these sprinklings, right? That's what we were playing with in the activity settings. The WeWork did a great job of it, by the way. That activity setting thing sort of filled in around work, those 3 things. Well, one of those barriers, if we start there every single time, we're not going to come to the next right place, because we need focus and a hyper level, which people got at home and are leaving their positions over right now, right? They have been for the last 6 months. And we've got collaboration at a hyper level, which is that teamwork thing that I'm talking about. So that's the hybrid, but we've got everything in between. We've got distributed teams, we've got technology, we got human experience, we got innovation. Good God, guys, where are we going with that word in the next 5 years? Innovation. No longer solving problems based on past results. Innovation. Asking new questions to solve problems of the future that we can no longer use history to predict. I think that's what we just went through. So design is intending to, cut the fog.
Predict the future.
Yeah, predict the future a wee bit. I mean, it's doors and it's walls and it's windows and it's finishes and this is architecture at its basics. However, cool factor, right? Mm-hmm. You go to this historic infrastructure, and the cool factor is alive, and people respond to it. Oh my God. Space still matters, and it always will. It always will.
So obviously, design is very important, but I think the mention of short lease terms probably hit some people in the audience. Mike, are lease terms actually getting shorter?
Well, you have a lot of, on a relative basis, new construction has held up nationally. Very rare, other than option space, would a landlord who's developing a new product do a short-term lease. It just doesn't really make sense. They might pre-build space, spec suites, whatever you want to call them. In Chicago, say right now, 700,000 feet is being built without a tenant. That's how you lease space fast in Chicago. Wow. Full floors are being built out, right? Loaners will spend $120, $130 a foot with no tenant, but it will lease if you do that. It gives you a competitive advantage. So I think for a number of larger clients that are looking also at new construction and existing, the new construction is 10 or 15 years nationally, just is. So it makes it easier for the existing buildings to do a longer term deal, 10-year renewal, 15-year renewal.
Right.
Good.
Right. Kelli, you mentioned partnering with WeWork. Is that something that you would have done pre-COVID? I mean, are you looking for more flexibility as a tenant, shorter lease terms? Is that important to you? Or are you committing long-term where you are opening new offices or moving?
We're sort of in the middle. I mean, with building out radio studios, it's a lot of work. Satellite dishes on the top of buildings, and it's very complex. So at one point we would sign significant long-term leases, and I would say now we're somewhere in the middle. New York, we didn't have to build out radio studios. That's why WeWork was actually an option for us. But I mean, if there's fiber already in the building, all of those things, I mean, that definitely is an incentive when you're looking at a space.
So, Scott, thinking about things from the investment standpoint, how does something like lease term changing impact things for you? How has it impacted things when you've taken some product to the market?
Yeah, it's a challenge specifically in this micro market of Milwaukee. I think we talk about, where do you spend most of your time? If you think about hours in a day, office, home. What do you spend most of your time doing during the day? Cell phone, right? But no one wants to spend $1,200 on a device you use every day. If you took the cell phone down to how much it costs you per minute to use the cell phone, it's probably way less than your $19 martini at Elsa's. But my point of saying that is, I think the ideology of how to be progressive in office and to garner, more progressive office spaces is from the top. Really, is the people making the leasing decisions have to understand, if you want amenity-rich living, or if you want space that has the cool factor, the wow factor, the I want to be here factor, the recruitment factor. A lot of businesses use recruiters to recruit people and spend 35% or 25% on the income for 1 year to get someone, when you could probably spend an extra $1.50 a foot on rent and probably equally achieve the same goal, but to do that for your entire ecosystem. So I think the challenge is significant. I think especially here in Milwaukee, we've come from a very old school model, and what's up, Kevin? From an old school model, and I wish it was more progressive, quite honestly. I think that a lot of our new buildings and a lot of our old buildings that are Class A, if they had a lot more to offer and people were willing to pay $1 more from the leadership, I think it would really resonate to the community. But when we go to market, we see this all the time. The RFPs come in and it's price sensitive and they want the lowest price, and at that point it's like, I don't even want to respond because I'm going to lose, because it just doesn't work with and it's a community, right? It's a broker community, it's an owner community, it's a tenant community that I think has to be a little bit more sensitive, that pricing, construction, everything is going up and everyone wants rent to go down, and those two things can't happen together to have an ecosystem that's healthy. And so it's just more of a thought from everybody's position. Everyone gets RFPs, and the people that are shopping for price, if you want low price, you're not going to get the quality space that they're going to be happy in, or the build out that they want, or the extra $4 in TI. All of the numbers work economically, and there's a process to it. And so I guess maybe that's more of a plea than a statement, but to the community is, if we want to have better office space and more people looking at our office space in our community, we have to prepare them that $12 a foot space is $12 a foot space. And if we want to be at 21 or 22 or $24 a foot, and you want Class A, true Class A, like Fulton Market's at $42 a foot. I mean, how many buildings in Milwaukee rent for $42 a foot? Triple. Right. None.
Not office.
They probably won't in our lifetime, but that's okay.
Scott, don't be like that.
Realist. Just telling you like it is.
So, Mike, what are your thoughts on institutional investors and their kind of reactions and thoughts on what's happening with the office market right now?
Across the country?
Across the country, and maybe like get down to Milwaukee if you can.
Maybe I'll start with Milwaukee.
Oh, sure.
Not being that granular, tertiary markets, secondary and tertiary markets, right? So your main markets would be the smiley face: Boston, New York, Houston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, DC, I forgot. That's the smiley face. That's the gateway. That's where most institutional investors historically have wanted to play, because they feel safety there. Then you drop down to secondary markets, like I would say like a Denver, Austin, Minneapolis is now a secondary market. And what those markets have versus a tertiary market, which I would consider Milwaukee, and there's not an issue with desirability in tertiary markets, it's an institutional or private investor has to believe if they execute their plan, they can sell the building to somebody. And that's really what differentiates a secondary and a tertiary market. Most of the time, they don't believe I can do everything right on Chase Tower, I can't sell it. So who buys it? Who buys it as a group that's never going to sell it, right? More dynastic an approach. So I think what you'll see is, in talking to owners across the country, one of the things that I can hear loud and clear is they feel like maybe their asset managers have not been visiting their projects enough. They've been, via Zoom, down on places. Even before COVID, the leasing team might go once or twice a year to their New York office or something like that, but they haven't visited enough. If you haven't visited enough, you can't really figure out what's going on, can't get stuff approved and going fast, can't create these environments, can't see the user face to face and have a conversation. So because of that, my suspicion is Chicago right now is 130 million square foot office market downtown. It was 180 million square feet when I started in 1991. What happened is demolition, conversion to multifamily, conversion to hotel over time. That's what happened to that market. Of the 130 million feet, 45% of it is owned by people in New York. And the reason they came in is it was $1,000 a foot to buy in Manhattan. It was $100 a foot to buy in Chicago, price per pound. So I think the same thing you're going to probably see happen here over time. You're already seeing it with R2. Anybody who's got a presence in Chicago, they can go to Chicago and they can physically see an asset in Milwaukee, and it's not a big deal. So they can now cover it. If they're working in the Southeast, even if they like the building in Milwaukee, that's like, I got to do this one-off trip to Milwaukee. It just doesn't, the way asset managers work and how they're set up, I think that becomes a little bit difficult, but they can cover it through Chicago. So what I think you're going to see is more of the R2s and people who have either base in Chicago or play in Chicago, they're going to start coming up here on the office side. And, it makes sense. They should be able to understand the market, and there's some similarities between the two markets. So I think for Milwaukee, I would expect to see over time absentee ownership spike here and start pricing out local ownership. That'd just be my guess, which is good for you because you can build it and then
sell it.
Some New Yorkers can come and take you out.
Great.
So, Brady, we've kind of talked about predicting the future, but broad question, what does the future of work look like?
Teams. It looks complex, it looks multivariant, it looks matrixed is a word that was used pre-pandemic. Ask somebody who's your boss and they say which day. That's an insight for a matrix team. So the work looks incredibly complex. It is no longer industrialized, which is what the ice cube tray world of workplace was designed to do. Well, by the way, it's not a criticism necessarily, even though it's less human, but just lining people up and allowing them to just plug and play, that was an industrialized model. We're well beyond that now in work. So creativity, innovation, the rote and response work, the individual contributor work, I have just seen nothing but software solutions replacing that work continuously. I got 5 examples I could give you, but nothing but replacing that sort of work. So we are looking for smarter, more intrinsically motivated human beings. That attraction and retention was huge in 2006. It was huge in 1994. And it's going, in 5 years, it's going to still be huge. It's going to be huge. So, there's a massive amount of, I got one more. Middle management. Middle management is often cited in workplace strategy, and particularly as the difficult level of breaking through to get to the future of work, to get to what the employee experience needs to be, to get to what the environment, how much space you take down in order to support people. That middle management level will always inflate that. It's just natural. So that strata of work, if you're familiar with Peter Drucker, it's his strata of work type, is going to continue to shrink. It's going to continue to change and shift, and you can tell me if you think I'm right or not, but I think it's going to continue to change in the next 5 years.
I was going to ask Kelli, any of these themes that Brady's talking about, are you seeing that? Are you implementing that, moving towards that?
Let me have it.
I would just say, the last question you had asked about where do you see in 5 years the market? For us, I hope our offices continue to reflect our culture. If you see our office here that's being built, the prime space in the corners that have all the windows, we have entry-level positions, teammates who make cold calls all day. It's not the top leader for the market. So We really like to share the wealth with everyone, and even, the shared spaces, and really give everyone the opportunity, not just certain individuals. So going back to the collaboration, so.
Good.
Okay. Brady?
You used the word conversion, the conversive nature of workplace and making it something new and something new. I also see another, which is the confluence of different types of space. From a design perspective, it's easy. What higher education looks like is what the future of work looks like. So that's a direct example. Mm-hmm. So how you imagine being on a campus, a university campus, and moving between classrooms and living in a dorm room, all that type of living seems like when we go to the workplace, something just shifts automatically. Assigned seats are still in people's mentality. You can count assigned seats and you can calculate square foot. You can sign leases based on it. The way I'm talking about is much more difficult, but doable. So I think that confluence of different types of environments. Why isn't anybody? I don't know the answer to this, exactly what I'm trying to say. I talked to a gentleman who's medical, right? Medical background, and that's an office space. That's a work environment. So why aren't we looking at bringing these? It's gonna happen anyway. Sorry, it's gonna happen. We're gonna bring all these different confluence parts together. It will no longer just be taking down floor plates.
Right, so take the best aspects from different industries and ways of working and bring them.
Anybody done light industrial leases, right? Putting an office building in a light industrial complex, that's relatively, so I've seen a lot of it. I've done a lot of customers who've done that. Okay, so, that's a confluence that we're familiar with. We can imagine that today. I don't know how you put an office building in a hospital. I'm sorry, that's a bad one, but higher education is definitely looking at all kinds of relationships with business, incubation centers, and startups, and it's going on everywhere, isn't it? Right? It's happening all over the place.
Mike, do you have a response to that? Is that happening all over the place? Are you seeing that, or other trends?
Well, I think, and I was having a conversation with somebody that I met here. I think part of it is, we've been conditioned to, here's how you lease space, right? Here's the RFP, and then there's a mating of the peacocks, right? And brokers sometimes are conduit, brokers sometimes are not, and you have clients who are challenging on both sides, the occupier side and tenant side. But if you open your mind and just look at what's happening, you can create, to me, strategic advantage if you're representing an asset and you try to figure out these lanes that you can drive through to make people think. This is just a quick example, and I'm going to shorten it so that we don't have time for you actually to guess, but there's a project in Tampa called Water Street. It's a $4 billion development done by SPP, and the money is Cascade, which is Bill Gates' real estate investment arm. It's massive. It's right next to the Tampa Bay Lightning's arena on the water, and the owner of that is in this deal. It's one of the co-principals from an equity standpoint. This is Tampa. This is not Miami. So they have developed a 5-star hotel with condos on the top, sold out. They have 2 office buildings that are now new towers that are commanding the highest rents ever in Tampa. So they're about to launch a 3rd. And they've done a multi-family building called the Heron, Heron, Twin Towers. Okay, sold out. This multi-family building commands the highest monthly rents in all of Florida, including Miami. And if you think about this, Miami is Derek Jeter and Tom Brady, right? And this brand new building, and it's super nice. So I was touring and I said, hey, can you tell me, is this like people from Chicago getting out of the weather? It's just people migrating south, empty nesters. You guys, kind of COVID never existed, and some people are just like, hey, get me there, I want to go there, so I can just do whatever I want, whenever I want. And the developer said, after I tell you this, you're going to all just run to the bar because you're going to be so infuriated. The developer said, something, that's what we thought. But we survey religiously so we know what to build next. And he said to me, which I'm going to say to you, I've said this to hundreds of people, 0 have gotten it right. He said, what do you think is what occupation is the highest in this project with an average household income of $400,000. So, you get a hedge fund, private equity, doctor, it's Florida, plastic surgeon, who knows, right? So I'm not going to wait for you all to shout out answers. Number one occupation at a tower that commands more rent in Tampa than any place else in Florida, including Miami, with an income of $400,000, influencer. Okay? So think about that, and think about what they're going to build next. Instead of just that conference room, you're going to put podcast studios in that building. You're going to put a little stage setting so that with all these influencers and companies that are dealing with that, they now have amenities that make sense for them. That's where they should go because they're concentrated down there. So now that I've thoroughly depressed everybody in here, that you should have just been bashing a watermelon over your head on YouTube and you'd have $400K in the bank. But if you think about it, that's what I mean. Like, if you just traditionally think about office and you don't think about that kind of stuff, it's what you're talking about, right? You got to look at what's out there. You can't. Apple was a 50,000 foot office tenant in San Diego 2.5 years ago. Apple is now a 2 million square foot office tenant in San Diego. Where did they need this 2 million from? Because Apple never streamed. Hulu never streamed. Netflix, all the studio space is Warner Brothers, Paramount. It's all locked up. It's got to be built. And when you build it, you have to build facilities to serve it. That's a brand new industry. So in some markets, it's better than ever. Detroit, being locked to the car company, his head's ups and downs, it's all going electric. If you talk to GM, and I'm talking to all of them, they'll tell you in 5 years, look to the left, look to the right, there's not going to be a driver in one of those two cars, right? Yep. So for them, they've got all the intellectual capital in the U.S. sitting in the state of Michigan for automotive. So they're effectively going to be reborn as an industry, and they're going to do great, I think. And so that's my thoughts. Everybody should get out of real estate and go be an influence.
So Mike, you touched on it a little bit. There are a lot of office brokers in this room, and there are a lot of people who do business with office brokers every day in this room. How do brokers need to react and change to adapt to the changing markets? What do they need to give their clients that they might not be giving them now? I will tell you, working for Scott was a very different experience than working for some of the REITs that I've worked for.
I think they're looking for advice. They're looking more than typical, like what's the rates, and I'm like, where's it going, right? Yep. A year and a half ago, if you said ESG to me, I was kind of a bah humbug kind of guy. ESG, environmental, social, governance, that is here to stay.
Yes, it is.
90 days ago, Salesforce came out and said, if you're above a certain pay level, part of your bonus is going to be tied to ESG. So think about it. In downtown Chicago, Salesforce just signed a lease for 500,000 feet. I don't think they signed that in new construction. New construction is the bane of ESG, right? You burn up the planet building a building, and then you say, forget about that. See how good I, treat water. But sorry about that. But I think they wouldn't have done that. They would have gone to a post office. They would have gone to a existing building that was completely redeveloped if it existed. So for you, if you really start, educating yourself on ESG, start focusing on the S, the social side, because that's hard. How do you connect the tenants in your building to the community? Mm-hmm. Office building's actually perfect conduit. I think that you will have a competitive advantage. You will look like an outlier in this market because it's not even happening in big markets yet, but it will. So if you can carve that space, I'm an office broker in Milwaukee and I'm the number one ESG person, you will outperform the market all day long. So I think that's an area, maybe as you look at where should I invest some time and just educate yourself so you can talk intelligently about it. Maybe go to panels like this that aren't real estate related, but they're more ESG focused. I think that would be a great way to expand your book of business.
It's great advice. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to touch on that we didn't yet?
Oh, Lord.
Maybe I shouldn't have left it that open-ended. So I don't have the time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you were looking at office space in Milwaukee, did you look at a lot of different things, including this, or did you kind of make up your mind that I want something that's kind of redeveloped or new?
We did. But within the downtown area, we looked at the Bucks area for some redevelopment there. we connected, Alyssa and I did at one point. So no, we looked at all of our options. Even if we have in our mind, okay, this is going to be the space, we still look at all of our options. So
we haven't touched on Meta yet. Is that part of the plan? The whole virtual physical reality of work, and how you connect place that is physical with place that is virtual.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's coming. It's being experimented. It's still at like 1996 Mario Kart level right now, but believe me, it's coming. It's coming.
It's coming.
I don't know how you lease virtual space. Does anybody? I think it would be a damn good question to ask. I don't know how you do that, but I think in 5 years we'll be asking that question all over the place. Because our teams are distributed. Our teams are distributed all over the place. Every day we meet with people who aren't even possible, no matter whether we're required to come to the office or not. They're not even possible to be physically with us. So it's just the nature of what's coming.
So Meta being, can you give us a
Metaverse.
definition?
Oh yeah, physical virtual. I mean, in architecture, we design everything that way anyway, right? With the tools that we used in Prevision. So why not just take that in? It's a gaming platform, guys. If you have a 17-year-old right now or somewhere plus or minus 4 years around that, boy or girl, doesn't matter. What are they doing? What are they doing? What have they been doing? Well, I know my 17-year-old wasn't. Yeah. So they're having this amazing, social, productive experience around economics, around aesthetics, around politics, around social behavior, and it's all happening through this device. It's everything that work is wanting right now from people being innovative and smart. It's sitting right there. It's happening. So it's coming.
So how is Meta different from hybrid work, or is it it's half of the?
Yeah, let me correct that real quickly. Hybrid concerns me personally because it is a polar idea. It's either or. You pull a lever, or it's 50-50. I don't care. Maybe there's 3 levers, and work does not happen that way. We're all hybrid, even if we get up and go to meetings all day long, and that's just the nature of work. So it's not an either or scenario. That's going to hold us back and also keep us connected to workstations and offices and conference rooms. It's going to keep us connected to that. That's what it's for. I'm sorry. We have a lot of workstations, offices, and conference rooms out there, don't we? God, we got a lot of them. And not much investment was really made on the shutdown. They're all still sitting there. So Meta is a way to supersede that right now, and it's not going to work with the first phase. It's not going to work. But it's there to supersede the physical legacy, if you will, that's still sitting out there. And how much, give me a percentage, 90% of the workplaces? I don't know. Huge volumes of workspace out there that are sublease, maybe is the term you guys use, ready to go. Just lease it with the furniture as it is. So I know I'm rambling now, but Meta is the virtual, instead of Teams meetings, you actually enter a space. You've seen the goggles. It doesn't have to be goggles. It doesn't have to be. It's gaming reality of work.
Mike, is that something you're talking to clients about, or they're asking you about yet?
No. I mean, the one thing I'd say is to your original point when you said, hey, there's going to be a need for office space, right? I believe that because we're in this, I mean, you can go back to early 2000s with .coms. Then it was like there's not enough office space on the planet for all this explosiveness and all these things that were going to happen. And then the sky's falling in 2008, and the companies are going to, all the financial services as an industry is going to go down. And so this is a period in time. So trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen historically, whatever happens now, tenants go to open plan, then they start cramming bodies in, originally to save money, not we want collaboration, like, wow, I can get one person under 100 feet, maybe 80 feet, they compress them down, and then 2 years later, when they get up to go for coffee, they need way more space to, I'll sit next to you like this all day, but when I get up, man, you better give me some space. And so all of a sudden, it goes back up, and they end up virtually where they were in the beginning.
Yeah.
You can start a company in your garage and blow it up to be Google. I think it's impossible to put it back in your garage. I just fundamentally, I don't think you can or would want to. And so I think it'll just look different. Like, it'll feel different, to your point of how you use it. Or, would you have come in a project like this wouldn't have existed for you to come into without some really sharp people who said, hey, I've got some vision and I can create something and create an environment and experience that people want. So I think that's what's happening now. Why is Google's giving employees flexibility? That's a fact to you in the news. They're not giving employees flexibility. They're back. The reason why they're coming back is Google gives you 3 great meals a day, does your cleaning, all these things. They always did that. So if I'm a kid who's 25, I can eat my macaroni and cheese Velveeta, or I can go there and have some top chef come in and cook me up some serious food. So they've already created an environment that's like so connected.
Why? They expect turnover in periods of 2 to 3 years. They expect that. It's worth it 2 to 3 years to get that talent and expect it to move on and grow up. It's college. It's college. Brilliant. If you expect it, you design for it, you build for it, you provide for it, you get value back from it. That's a hell of a business strategy.
Well, it's worked so far.
It has indeed. Not for everybody.
Okay, so wrapping up, and then we'll get to audience questions, but you can answer both of these questions or one of them, whatever, or give me a totally different thought. But Kelli, what will we be saying about office market in 5 years, and what is your biggest takeaway from today?
Well, my biggest takeaway is that we just need to continue to follow the path that we're on as a company, continue to embrace our core values and have our offices reflect our culture, and knowing it won't work for everyone, but hopefully it works for the majority of teammates in our company.
Great. Mike or Scott, who are you pointing to? Anybody over here? Scott?
I need another minute. When COVID hit, I remember everyone, the panic set in the office market, and I said that the largest real estate transaction that'll ever happen will occur in the next couple of years, and I think we've seen that happen. Price per square foot in New York and HSBC's building with the 2 million feet that just was leased at some ridiculous rent will happen. I think the rhetoric of our minds right now is still very tainted. That's hybrid, that's cater, that's, the reality is that all of these large companies that are doing whatever they say they're doing, as soon as earnings start to suffer, as soon as the reality of the P&L starts setting in, we're going to all be back in the office, I hope sooner than later. Our company has been in the office we've never not been in the office. And, I believe that the teamwork from our office is what makes us so successful and productive. And I think we're going to see, I would love to just see everyone rip the Band-Aid off and just say, get back to the office. Because unless you have some medical reason, bona fide medical reason why you can't be in the office, companies grow best by teams. And so I hope to see everyone back in the office, and it'd be nice to see the streets in our downtown fill up again, and the restaurants not be closed on Monday for lunch and Tuesday for lunch and Wednesday for lunch and open Thursday and Friday. I mean, the ecosystem is suffering by way of, in my own mind, complacency of I'm at home working, but I'm golfing and cutting the grass and walking the dog and doing all the other bullshit that you're really supposed to not be doing, but you say you're working, and it happens. And so while the world says we're more productive today, I would say to show me that who came up with the study and the metrics they used, because there's nothing that beats a teamwork in the office for us, and I think that's for most companies. So hope to see everyone back in the office.
Piggybacking on that, I'll say full employment is not a good thing for corporate America. So, if you think these companies are, hybrid's great and all this and that, right now it's full employment. If an employee who you think is good decides, hey, listen, I really like working 3, 4, 5 days at home, and you say, I'm sorry, but our company is strict policy, everybody's in the office 5 days, they'll say, I love the company, bye. I'm walking across the street to a competitor, I'm making 125% of what you were paying me, and they're gonna let me work 5 days a week, even if they won't let the other people in my job work 5 days a week, right? It's crazy. So I look at things like, it was oh no inflation, oh no unemployment, oh no unemployment. A little unemployment is going to be really, really good for the office market, I believe. Because then who's called people back to the office? Goldman Sachs. The mail guy makes $1 million at Goldman Sachs. So they can't just walk across the street and get the same income. Banks have done it. Hedge funds never left. In Chicago, the biggest hedge funds were forging essential personnel letters during the shutdown so they could go in the office. If you're making that much money, you're going to roll the dice a little bit on the rules. So I think as you see companies feel more comfortable that people can't just leave and walk across the street and get the same job at more money, I think you're going to see a little bit more balance. So people come back to the office, it's just going to take a little bit longer, but I do think there'll be a point, especially if you see like a point increase in unemployment, that you're going to see it happen faster. That's just my guess.
And just one more thing, that the overpayment of that person going across the street and the overpayment of a used car that is now selling with 50,000 miles what you paid for it, the logic train will not prevail. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable in my mind, and so maybe that person can walk across the street for a 3-day-a-week job and making more money, but let's talk to them in 36 months and see what they say.
5 years.
Or 60 months.
Or 60.
Whatever you want.
I hope, this is more of a hope, I suppose. In 5 years, what we're saying is we actually learned from the experience of the pandemic. I actually don't think we can say that today. I still think there's some part of business that's waiting for business as usual, I think. But what would we have learned? What we've known for decades about what it takes to create an engaged human being. There's 3 things. It's well documented, it's well studied. An individual needs to feel autonomous. Autonomy means I have value, I have purpose, I have strengths. Needs to feel self-motivated, needs to feel empowered. I can act on my value. And most importantly, I think, is in good relationships with coworkers. Still my favorite question on the Gallup Q12 is, do you have a best friend at the office? It's a fascinating question. If you answer you have a best friend at the office, they assume you're more likely engaged with who you're with and what you're doing. All that ties back into place. Place is the foundation from which all those things are grown. Also virtual, but it's got a ways to go. Don't talk about it yet. I don't think so, at least, and it's crap right now. But anyway, it's coming. So I think those 3 things, autonomy, self-determination, and relationship, are what we hopefully will be cracking in the nature of work and the nature of place, and taking down the right amount of space, whatever that means.
That's great. Thank you. Tracy, are you ready for audience questions? If there are any.
Let's see.
Oh, this question's for Mike.
Feels good.
CBRE just invested another $100 million in Industrious Office. We've heard WeWork mentioned, but where do you see that relationship going in another couple of years on top of the $230 million that they invested last year?
I think flexible office, Industrious is years ago they would call it co-working, and now it's evolved. It's like human resources, people, talent, the nomenclature changes. You would have thought when COVID hit, which happened, a lot of the co-working venues struggled. Mm-hmm. Some are still struggling. And I think you briefly, that guy at WeWork got it right. He was so far ahead of really creating environments, and people are like, wow, this is kind of cool working in something that doesn't look like traditional office space. His timing, when it all kind of wanted to go public and all that didn't work out, he probably could take that thing public right now at what he was going to do, and it would probably work out. But so Industrious, CB has made a significant investment in a, we'll call it agile, flexible office, whatever you want to call that space, because we think that it's got a lot of runway, and I think part of it is the reality is, depending on how big your asset is, if you can have some of that in there to release the pressure for a tenant, because I spent my whole life before I switched to the management side as a leasing agent. What would I lick my chops on? 50,000 foot tenant in my building who needed 5,000 feet for 6 months. I'm like, oh no, you're going to pull that 5,000 out to your lease term. Maybe I can get the whole thing wrapped up and lock the whole thing down. And the tenant's stuck. I only need the space for 6 months. Now I've got 4 years left on my lease. I have to do a 4-year lease on this 5,000 feet. I've got to do it because we need the space in the building contiguous, right? And so buildings that have a flexible operator in them, whether it's a WeWork, an Industrious, a Convene, I think they do have a competitive advantage. I think a lot of tenants look at that as another avenue for me to have flexibility that I can either pre-program into my space knowing it's there or know it's a relief valve as needed. So that's why CB is, interested in that category, because we believe it has viability in and of itself and also what it brings to the ecosystem of a building.
Excellent.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for your insights and time today. The program has been recorded and will be shared in the next week for those of you who couldn't make it. First, with those who are here, and then we'll post it on our YouTube page. And thank you to our presenting sponsor, Make Signs Not War, and Lindsay and Steve. And thank you to CBRE, CCIM, Forward Space, and Founders 3. We couldn't do any of this without you.